think social entrepreneurship is an exciting space that is both modern and ancient, inclusive and purposeful. It offers a way for all of us as business owners, as consumers, volunteers, donors, representatives of all sort of walks of life, government, education, to contribute so much more to our community by also just sort of doing some of our day-to-day life activities and choices. I think social entrepreneurship encourages sustainability. I think it's a wonderful teacher, and it certainly informs what I do. The Social Enterprise Schools program and Understanding Social Enterprise. I really value working with and learning from the Academy, the facilitators, the global network, the team involved in the delivery, and those who are the participants on the program, those who come, whether it's virtual or in the room. And one of the things that I really love about it is the capacity that's inbuilt in all the activities for reflective practice or practitioner-led learning. For me, this type of learning really encourages those hands-on experiential opportunities, because we all have a story and all of us have experiences to share. And I think there's much greater learning that takes place and that transformative sort of change that the Academy advocates for when everyone that's in the room or the space can actively contribute by sharing their stories, by contributing. For me, this comes back to a belief around social enterprise and social entrepreneurship, that it is dynamic. It changes depending on the situation. You know, for some it might be dealing with really long-standing issues, and others it's emerging, responding to new opportunities and emerging opportunities. And I think by ensuring that everyone in the space or the room can see their own strengths and their own assets, it helps realize that change and that deeper level of change faster. I think another aspect to me that makes the Academy programs so interesting is that you take the programs to the learners, that contextualizing the learning within the landscape of that community or within the particular focus of that region, that area, is really vital, and a lovely aspect of the program. I think it also encourages those that are in the room to really focus on their strengths and assets and feel recognised and heard. And I do take this seriously for improving my own practice too, and have recently returned from being in the United Kingdom, Scotland, and specifically on the Isle of Skye. I think the unique landscapes of the Isle of Skye, the island life, the challenges, infrastructure and communities, and movement within communities, and how people would shift and change, to see how those people that want to build a sustainable future have really created interesting businesses that support the community, but have also turned into multi-million-dollar enterprises that employ local people, giving choice and opportunities, is so exciting. And I think that coming back to Australia to think about some of those ways and approaches has been really informative to my practice, and I think the Academy really encourages that sort of thinking and approaches and that collective shared understanding, which is terrific. If I could go back in time, I would tell my younger self to be really upfront about your purpose, your social cause that you wanted to support. For me, in my business, it's young people and education in its broadest sense. But I think coming from a background in philanthropy, I saw that I could support that. When I think about my business, it was established sort of 20 years ago, and conversations and business planning sort of conversations were quite different then too. But I that coming from that philanthropy background, I guess I sort of kept how I would do my pro bono work, how I would contribute and donate to causes sort of separate to my day-to-day activities. And I think it would have been better to integrate, and I think that's certainly what is really fostered and sort of the driver in social enterprise and social entrepreneurship. No regrets, but certainly interesting. As for any project, you're always looking for solutions on many fronts. Often there's quite a few that are expected, but there are also some unexpected. I think for me, a particular example in that sort of social entrepreneurship journey is finding the right sort of governance structures and the flexible and transparent ways to operate that both demonstrate clearly the purpose of the business and what it's intending to do, and how the outcomes are achieved and what those outcomes are. Managing startups when there are so many unknowns really relies on robust relationships, and I think a lot can be overcome, and I guess that's the answer to how those challenges are overcome. I think when time, connection and relationships are prioritized, that makes such a significant difference. It might take a little longer initially, but the results are incredible. And to borrow a quote that's attributed to Aristotle, with the whole being so much greater than the sum of the parts, I think that's so apt and appropriate for social enterprise, because I think when those relationships are formed and those connections and those sort of fires ignite for other people or others connected to it, or that sort of that capacity to share the knowledge or the learning as you go through the journey with social enterprise with others, really enables change to flourish. The first one is find a word. So in a room, I ask those to list the strengths and assets that they might have, whether it's the project, themselves, the community. That depends on your focus. And they do this individually, or they can do it in pairs, and they write down maybe 10 words, try and get single words, and then in a online program you put those words into a sort of find a word search where you identify those words. What this does, and then you swap the sheets, so the next person along, or the person opposite, finds the words in that other participant's puzzle, and it shares the strengths and the assets around, and you'll find commonalities, but you'll also find really different ways that people look at what they see as an asset or a strength. From there, we collect, gather the information as across, sort of on a board or white paper for everyone to sort of see what those strengths are, and then it can help prioritize, and might add a Diamond 9 sort of ranking system to really, for that sort of collective group to decide on what's the most important, the next tier down, the next tier, until you sort of say, okay, well, this will then give us a focus for what we're working on through the program. So that's one activity. The second activity is, as it sounds, to track the gold moments and those that you might be working towards. So after an event or an experience or a trading activity, what I do is literally have little squares, so an A4 page divided into 4 and sort of cut up like that, gold squares, and I've used orange because it sort of feels like a colour that's lively, but it's also, it's quite a different colour to gold. So we asked people to write down gold moments, like what worked well. It's a terrific way to capture the success and celebrate what was done really well. And then also on individual pieces of paper, on the orange pieces, to say, look, what else do we need to do? What are we working on? What needs to be ready for the next event? It's a really efficient way to both, and it can be done in, just a couple of minutes. It's a really efficient way to capture the strengths and the terrific things that happened and celebrate those. And also it efficiently draws together a to-do list so that everyone's on the same page as far as what we need to work on next. So they're two really quick activities that are aligned with the Kolb learning cycle and that reflective practice, but really participatory, and those that encourage, ideas that, again, are that one or some or all of us might have, but need to be tracked and recorded. Some of my most recent work has been with young people in high school or secondary age, 13 to 15 years old, who were participated on a program because it was felt that they were disengaged or vulnerable, or attending but not to their greatest capacity. And was there a way to reignite and re-engage those learners? Part of the program was social enterprise schools, and what I found most compelling and so informative was that when we really focused on social cause as a priority in the program, well before what business they might like to do and those sorts of things, is that these learners, these students, were so articulate. They had opinions, they had evidence, they discussed and debated, they were able to disagree respectfully and with compassion for the social causes that those in the room wanted to support. There was no put downs, there wasn't sort of the negativity or the dismissing, because all of these students came from a space of it was personal and it really meant something to them. And this sort of, to see this in a sense sort of as the facilitator in the room, it's sort of you try and set up a nice, safe, welcoming space, but there's always variables, of course. But to see these students, they were all of one mind that it was going to be discussed appropriately and respectfully. And it made me really think about the values that these students had and their priorities, and I guess looking more at values-based ways to, or recognizing their own values, I guess, and using that as a way to think about other areas of their lives and what application that has in social enterprise is sort of an area that I'm really interested in, and certainly one that I looked at while I was on the Isle of Skye, and then later in other places that I've visited. And it's really a really interesting sort of space, and wonderful to experience that sort of focus. And it didn't just happen once, it was repeated, which is really encouraging. And while there's a lot of terrific social enterprises and lots of great examples, I think maybe one other thing that I've been focusing on lately is learning how to play chess. That's been very humbling, but what I think is so terrific about it is that it reminds you of sometimes how hard it is to learn something new. But for me, chess kind of really reminds me a little bit of social enterprise, that you've got to no two things are the same necessarily, or in chess, no two games are the same, and it does require fast and flexible thinking. You are required to sort of back yourself. You're required to trade, and you really want to understand the value of those trades. And I think, after all, social enterprise is in that same space of making progress on established practice or rules, whether it be state, global, conditions that are informed by the community, or going back to, me being a wool classer when I was starting out, conditions that are put upon communities, not necessarily of their own doing or choice, but that are impacting them. And how do you make informed choices and decisions in the best way possible to find those solutions and move ahead? For chess, I certainly need more practice, and I think it's taught me a lot, but I think also being open to sort of opportunities and possibilities is what it's taught me too.